initial pitch, which was really just character-based. They asked me to expand it out a little bit more, and I started thinking about the world that the ponies lived in general. I definitely dipped into my childhood love. I've always said that My Little Pony, I used my inner child as my creative consultant. So I always kind of went back to the things that I liked and I loved when I was 8 years old, around that age, and very into fairy tales, so jumped right into that, started pulling out like iconic ideas and concepts and themes that we see in fairy tales. But also, I was like a very early kind of fantasy nerd. Read and was really into The Hobbit around the time I was 10. So yeah, so a lot of the grander world of My Little Pony is not just based on fairy tales, but like sort of classic fantasy stuff. I've often called like Canterlot, I always used to call Gondor for girls. Like built into the side of a mountain, you know. It's like so bringing those like bigger, grander ideas again from these books and these stories that had themes that I loved. So very much of it came from that as well.
So you drew from vast amount of different things then. Are there any other media that influenced you, or did you pull mainly from literature and things like that?
In a general sense, I feel like that was kind of it. Since in terms of when we were making the show, you know, a lot of sensibilities came from, you know, my love of animation, of course, and you know, studying animation, going to school for animation, having worked in animation for a while. So even things about like tone and cartooniness, even like thinking little bits and snippets of like Bugs Bunny and Chuck Jones got in there. Like, you know, an anvil falls on Twilight Sparkle's head. I mean, that's Looney Tunes, you know. So so even that got in there too.
That's kind of amazing. Could you tell us about meeting the production team, the VAs, when you first met them for the first time, what your impressions are and how it went?
You have to forgive me because it really was a very long time ago for me at this point. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, several years ago. I was kind of isolated from a lot of the creative team once we got into production because everything was being done in Canada, and I was down here in the States by myself. I had my writing team, but I only saw my writers, you know, one day a week and any individual writers. Like I'd only see everybody maybe once a month or something to work with the writing. So when we went to cast the show, Studio B, which is now VHX, auditioned a bunch of Canadian actresses that I never met. You know, having worked in LA, I had a lot of actresses that I like to work with, but that wasn't an option. We had to work with Canadian artists exclusively. So they sent me auditions. So these were names I didn't know. I'd look them up, faces I wasn't familiar with. I was just listening to the voices. So, and I was listening to them to see whether or not they, A, were funny, B, great good actors, and C, embodied the feeling of the character, of what we wanted from the character. So my first impressions were almost like entirely professional in that sense, because all I was hearing were their voices.
Wow, I genuinely did not know that.
Yeah.
Just a learning experience. Were there any surprises when it came to pairing VAs with the respective characters as things went along?
Well, again, just because it's just a process of, and this is how it works everywhere. They send you auditions from anywhere between maybe 4 or 5 people to, you know, sometimes over a dozen. So, I mean, you listen to the voices and you make your pick, and there it goes. So I don't know if anything's particularly surprising. Because you cast your cast and make your picks.
It certainly went a long way to making the show as popular as it is, a lot of the voice acting, and your character designs really carried it into this entire fandom. It would not have worked as well without those concepts in the beginning, so I just want to say thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome, thank you. Came up with all the basic concepts. Again, from a point of practicality, just the profession of animation, it costs money to have 10 bazillion locations. So you pick the ones that you're going to use over and over again. So, had Ponyville, Canterlot, oh my gosh, what's the name where the Pegasus live? Thank you. My husband came up with that name. Yes, I couldn't think of one. I guess I couldn't remember it either. Lotsdale, thank you. So I came up with those main locations, expecting to go through them constantly throughout the series. So I'm not sure I can say that there were any locations that I had come up with. And when you're making these shows and you're working with your writers, you know that it's going to evolve as you're going. So you know that new locations and new ideas and new characters are going to come up as you're creating the show. So I was just sitting back to wait to see what would happen. So.
Were there any plot lines or any character? Because you said it's a very character-driven show, and you conceptualized it as a very character-driven piece. Are there any directions you would have liked to take characters in?
Yeah, there were a handful of characters that I thought that I had kind of planned arcs for. I had a little bit of a different idea for where the Cutie Mark Crusaders were going to go than I think eventually how they turned out. So for them, the big thing I wanted to do in particular was with Sweet Belle and Scootaloo. So the Cutie Mark Crusaders want their cutie marks. And they're trying all these different things they want to do to find what their life's purpose is so their cutie marks would appear. And Sweetie Belle initially just wanted to be like her sister, so she wanted to be an artist, she wanted to sew, she wanted to be beautiful, and she was pursuing this particular dream. Same with Scootaloo. Scootaloo was pursuing this dream to fly, like her idol Rainbow Dash. And the story I wanted to tell for those two was that, we don't always, it's gonna sound sad at first, we don't always get our dreams, And sometimes you work really hard pursuing a very specific goal, something that in your brain you think you're meant to do, or that you really want to do. But sometimes we find out that our life has a different purpose than what we're shooting for. And what both Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo, I wanted them to learn was just that. Sweetie Belle didn't even realize she had this beautiful singing voice. And once she gave up trying to be someone she wasn't, and embraced what was really talented about her, same with Scootaloo, that maybe she'd never be able to fly, but she's amazing on her scooter, that their cutie marks would appear once they really accepted who they were. And that was the arc that I was going with for those characters. I understand it ended a little bit differently for them in the show, but that's an example of some characters that I had specific arcs in mind.
It certainly sounds like a lesson that girls should learn.
I think anybody could use a lesson like that. I think that's true of everybody. I think there's all like when we're kids, we have dreams for ourselves. There's things that we want to do. Something as big as I want to be a rock star. Something as mundane as maybe I want to get married. Sometimes we don't get our dreams, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something more important that you're meant for.
Were there any lessons in particular? Because it's quite an educational show with sort of life lessons and emotional intelligence. Is there anything in particular you wanted your audience at the point when you started, you wanted them to get out of the show from a learning perspective?
Well, maybe nothing so specific. I think, for me, I think those are the kinds of stories I want to tell. Some storytellers just want to make you laugh. Some of them just want to keep you on the edge of your seat. There's different ways to get an audience riveted and interested in a story. And for me, that is about connecting to a character and relating to their journey. So, in all the stories I like to tell, they are all about a character learning something about themselves. So it's partly for the audience, you know, like the story about the Cutie Mark Crusaders. That is a life lesson for somebody to learn. And you know, part of me is like, yeah, sure, this could really help somebody someday. But the other part of me is like, this is entertaining. You know, this is fun to watch a character, to get really invested in a character and their flaws, and seeing them going like, oh, you're so close, I just want to see you get it right. And when you're really invested in the character and you see them change and you see them learn, that's satisfying, that's entertaining. And that's storytelling to me.
You can definitely see that it's carried through into a lot of your work, that angle of character-driven storytelling. And it is really admirable that across your entire repertoire, you have carried through on that dedication to characters. It is very, very admirable.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like I said, that's just how I like to tell stories.
Certainly works. Have you had any ideas that have found homes in other projects that you've worked on post-Pony?
A little bit, maybe not in any sort of specific sort of way. You know, because every show is different, every character is different, every team that you work with is different, and it's important to use the strengths of your team and work with your team and their ideas. But in terms of like themes and concepts, without being able to come up with anything specific, I would say yes. You know, that I'm like, oh, I didn't quite get to go to this place with this character that I wanted to, but here I have this new character that's in a similar situation. I can take them to a similar place, even if it's not exactly the same thing. It's like, oh, I can finally tell that story about that feeling, or I can finally tell that story about that lesson, even though it isn't exactly the same as it would have been in the other show. It could be similar in this one.
Also, that you do that, get that creative satisfaction, just go into a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a big thing about being creative in general. Recently, you know, a lot of talks that I've had, the question of rejection has come up a number of times, and how to deal with rejection. And I remind people that, you know, just because somebody said no to something now doesn't mean that it's done forever. You know, you might be able to revisit that idea 10 years from now, 15 years from now. The timing could be different. You just haven't found the person who likes that idea yet, or the right venue to use that idea in. So, yeah, you just put it in your pocket and take it out later.
Do you have like a book of unused ideas? You're like, right, I can flip through this in my head.
It's all in here.
Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't write it. I don't know. It just sticks in there. I tend to remember it.
Feel the good ideas stay just right there.
Yeah.
What are some of the more memorable moments of working on Pony and working with your team?
I think there's so many, and they're all sort of like, some of them are big, some of them are small. Like one thing that I remember was being in the story meeting for Sonic Rainbow with Robert Zetti and Mitch Larson. And I just remember we were working through that story and going like, well, this one's gonna be good. Like it was just kind of coming together really well, and everything was falling into place. And you know, sometimes you're working on stories and you have to like really struggle to make it work, and that one just came together really nicely. So then when the episode, that's my favorite episode in season 1, and you know, so when it all came together in the end, that was very satisfying, but it was very satisfying to kind of know that I could tell. That's a strong memory. Here's kind of a little, like a small one, but kind of a funny one. Well, first I should start with like getting to direct John Delancey was very memorable. I'm a very big Star Trek fan. We told the Hasbro executives when they were asking us about Discord, and I said, like, he's like Q from Star Trek, and they went, can we get John Delancey? I'm like, You tell me. Can we? I don't know. I want to. So getting to meet him and direct him for the first time, I was so nervous. I was really, really nervous, and so he's gonna kill me. He kept saying Shutterfly instead of Fluttershy. And I was so embarrassed having to ask him to correct himself. But very endearing. But I was just so nervous through the whole thing. And then another small little snippet was, John coming from live action, and I kept asking him to deliver the lines a little faster. Couldn't get him to be quite as fast as I needed him to be, because in cartoons people talk at a pretty fast clip. So you can speed up characters' voices quite a bit. Most of the shows I work on, the actors deliver their lines. You want it to sound natural, so you don't want them to speed through the lines. You ask them to speed them up like 5 to 10%, which is usually forgivable in animation. But with John, the episode was a little too long. I said, can we speed him up 15%? And I remember her being really excited that we sped him all the way up to 15% and it still sounded okay. I'm like, yes. And that's a very small, little, silly sort of thing. But for somehow that really sticks in my memory.
It shows that you have a lot of pride in your work, that's something you go, yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. It's all those small, all the little things, and that was one that stood out. I mean, I could probably prattle on forever. This little tiny details like that. I'm trying to think of any of the ones that were just big and significant, but most of those revolve around when I started seeing the reactions online that were bigger than I ever expected. Those were some pretty memorable moments. Just finding threads and threads and threads of people talking about it, going what is happening?
What was that like when you started? When did you realize it had gone beyond its initial audience into this?
I started. What was it? It was. It's gonna sound weird, but when I started seeing people talking about it in a positive way on 4chan. The positive part of that being the important part. That's when I think I realized that this is not what I was expecting.
It's weird is relative when you're at a Brony convention. What was the reaction of the team when, who realized first that it was getting so big and was getting this strangely adult audience?
Well, like I mentioned before, I was a little bit isolated from most of the team. I was working from my home office from day to day while everybody was up in Vancouver. So the only story that I ever got relayed to me from anybody realizing that this was blowing up was from Mitch, who I sent him and the writers. I had found a video of a Russian Brony get-together where a bunch of adult Russian dudes got together and were singing Winter Wrap-Up.
Awesome.
I don't remember how I stumbled across that online, and I sent that to my writers, and Mitch told me that was when it hit him. Then he was like, oh, this is going to be something we were not expecting, at all. That. He said that's when it hit him. Which I think is fun, because that would hit anybody.
Yeah, that's definitely dropping you in the deep end.
Yeah.
Were there any practical jokers in the group that you work with?
Again, I don't want to be boring, but I spent most of my time alone. Just in my home office 4 days a week, just doing notes and drawing alone and emailing things to everybody. So I practical joked myself.
We're going to take just a couple of questions. There was an online poll that Bronycon ran and got some questions. If you don't mind answering those?
Sure.
What's your favourite episode that you worked on and or watched? And that's from Rolling Wonder.
From what?
Rolling Wonder is the person who asked this. What is your favourite episode that you worked on or that you watched?
I think I mentioned it before. I really enjoyed Sonic Rainbow from the beginning to the end. From its inception and from its completion. That is the best episode of season 1 to me.
What was it about that one that really captured you, made you think, oh, this is amazing?
Well, that one for me felt like this is what I want this show to be. That's when everything kind of came together. I hate to be boring again, but it just keeps coming back to Sonic Rainbow for me.
When you stated you had a vision plan for the main six, did you ever have a vision or specific goal plan for Spike?
I had a few little ideas here and there that I wasn't sure. Again, you know, while you're working with your writers and working with your team and seeing how things evolve and change, maybe this character will go in this direction, and maybe that character will go in this direction, but I do think that I figured that by the end of it all, he would at the very least grow to his full size and just be a gigantic, epic, awesome dragon breathing fire all over the place and ponies but then always like his sweet self on the inside and like the fun irony of somebody being just majestic and huge and amazing and also just like still really nice and sweet.
Still looking up to Twilight, even he's looking down at her.
Exactly.
Out of all the shows you worked on, which character would you say was the most fun to design?
It's funny because like the ponies are basically all the same except different hair. Slightly different eye shapes. So the only one that really kind of I'd say would stand out. Let's see. It wasn't that there were characters that were more fun to design than other ones, but ones that might have been a little more challenging. Rarity stands out to me because there's an interesting design aspect to her hair that's based off of the character Margaret from Dennis the Menace. Where her hair looks like it's a flat piece of paper that's just curled in let's see, I think there were like maybe 5 different versions of Granny Smith before we settled on. It was really hard to figure out how to draw a really old pony and still make it appealing. Spike, I'm actually particularly proud of. Like every time I look at him, I'm like, I did a good job on him. I was trying to find a really like a middle ground between a dragon and a toddler. So that's why he kind of has a bit of a diaper butt.
He does, yeah.
He's got the little arched back, and his belly sticks out, and he's kind of big, and his little legs are a little bit hyperextended because I wanted him to look like a little 2-year-old toddling around to try to make him cute. So I'm actually pretty proud of the Spike character design.
Oh, you described it like that now, so much.
He's got a diaper butt.
Which design did you start with? Which one came to you like first, earliest in the process? You went, that's it, that's the one I'm going with.
Well, when I was first doing the initial character designs, I was working with the G1s, the versions of them that were still G1s in my head, and I was just trying to come up with the, what is the base pony body? Because I knew that's where it was going to go. It's like all ponies are going to be the same, they're just going to have different hair. But of course, the character that I was drawing to try to figure out what a basic pony would look like was Firefly, which became Rainbow Dash. So that's what I'd say.
That's funny. You work post-pony. Is there anything in particular that you enjoy designing, just character-wise, after MLP? Any shows you've worked on afterwards?
Not to sound like a shameless plugger, but I'm really proud of my character designs on superhero girls. I spent a lot of time. It was super important to me that they, we have a show about teenage girls, and I wanted to show how different teenage girls could be and could look. So I had 6 characters and 6 different body types, and it's so important to me as a character designer that you can take one look at your character, or that anybody who isn't involved can take one look at your character and take a pretty good guess of who they are and what their personality is like. And I spent a lot of time on the superhero girls designs, all 6 of those main girls. The 6 boys, the 6 villains, the boys and the villains, a lot of people on my team I worked with them with, but the 6 main girls I designed myself, and I'm very pleased with them. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about superhero girls, because it's clearly really important to you. What went into your thoughts process for each of those designs? As in, what were you trying to achieve with each one? Was there something in particular that you wanted to get across?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's why they were so fun and why they took me so long. Was because I had to embody who they are as heroes and what their powers are.